So tonight I'm inviting each of us to think about new and unique people-driven innovations and initiatives that we as a society can create together. We probably only have about 40 years left as a median number to make a difference. I get nervous about complacency and comforts that allow us to stop disrupting and inventing. Detroit is likely going to be one of the most dynamic stories of our time because they're desperate. But what do you do when you're not desperate? What do you do when you have great schools and great industries, green space, and money? That's what TheEditorial.com is trying to figure out. We're going to start easily and slowly with a topic you can take any way you'd like. I would like you to tell us your view of a vibrant city. What would it look like, and what matters to you in that community? This is your fantasy of a vibrant city. What matters to you in it most? And why don't I start with Jonathan, and we'll just go down the line. Tell us a bit about yourself.
New York.
Just
Cambridge.
I love New York. I grew up in New York. I think New York is great.
What is it
when
about
they
New
got
York?
rid of the crime and they put the little bike lanes in, it got lamer. But there was a sense of agency. Like there was Fat Alley, East End Gang. There was all kinds of guys on the subway, but you could move through it. You could use your personal power to get the good stuff and avoid the bad stuff. It was exhausting in a way. Like you could go do nothing on a Saturday except get a quart of milk and be like, "Geez, I'm exhausted," because I'm like, did I make eye contact? Was that eye contact? Was it, But I love that. I love that action. I love the range of possibilities. And when we get rid of the range of possibilities, when we protect and secure and ensure and clean, I find it numbing. And so to me, a place with a range of things, good and bad, that can happen, wider the better, is what I think of as a city and a place I want to be.
Before we move over to Anna, I'd just like to know, is it the New York you grew up in, or is it the New York today, and is there a big difference?
It's the one I grew up in, because today is cleaner and lamer and better, which...
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay. Anna, what's your fantasy as a community and a city that's vibrant?
I don't know. I think I'm more of a San Francisco person myself. No, I think... I think I agree in that there's got to be diversity to be vibrant and interesting. There's got to be accessibility. There's got to be public spaces that are used, and I always find that wherever there's really good food, there's really great public spaces. So I think that, to me, I'd love to see something like a public market or just a really cool place to hang out and see a lot of great ingredients. And it's sensory, it's a lot of smells and things like that. But I was also really impressed by, did anybody go to the Porch Festival in Somerville? I thought that was pretty outstanding and creative, because now that we're in Somerville a little bit, I'm impressed by what's going on there to keep it vibrant, and also all the art that's popping up there. And it's, there's art everywhere, and there's a lot of accessibility in Somerville. So,
Somerville fans.
It's my turn.
Yeah, it's your turn, Sean. We want to know from a very philosophical level.
I already told everyone that I don't know how to answer these questions, so I'm probably more on Anna's side than John's side. I lived in San Francisco for a bunch of years, and I love that city, but I love the city that we're in here too. I think if you'd asked me this question 15 years ago, I'd have said, what makes a city vibrant is if there are good bookstores and good movie theaters and good cafes and good restaurants and good music. And now that I have children, I don't get to do any of those things. So I think it's more like good little league teams and good soccer, good, youth orchestras or something.
I think you have some fans out here.
So, but generally, I think, I was trying to think what the general answer to this question is, because philosophers are really abstract, and that's supposed to be my role. And so I was thinking what makes a good city is that it's got places instead of locations. And I guess what I mean by that is places are that's where communities gather, and that's where events happen, and that's where people get together and they really make something. Locations, that's like the coordinates that your GPS takes you to. And it's not identified by what happens there, it's just identified by where it is. And it seems to me that there should be places, there should be events, there should be communities gathering, there should be energy, there should be things happening. And that can take many, many different forms. And I think that all the people up here, except for me, are adding that to the community. And that seems to me what really makes a vibrant city.
Oh, hi. Well, I think I'd go further afield. I was in Sao Paulo 2 years ago, and I was really, really impressed. Particularly, I had heard this legend, this myth that I didn't think could be real, that the mayor had outlawed public advertising and was tolerant of street art. I thought, this is impossible. And when I arrived, the first thing I saw was this huge billboard of Giselle in her underwear, and I said, well, then it's not true. But as I kept going closer and closer to the city, I began to see billboards that were empty and covered with graffiti and street art. And I couldn't believe it. And when I heard that this was actually true, when I saw it, there was really, I mean, you could have a sign in front of your building, of your business, but there was no advertising. I decided I had to meet the mayor. He couldn't see me. But I did meet the head of culture for the city of Sao Paulo. Now, I just want to point out that the head of culture for the city of Sao Paulo, his budget is bigger than all of New England combined, which isn't saying much because, you know, we don't really support the arts. I mean, the government doesn't very much. And when I arrived, there was a municipal gallery, and there was a sign, and I'm Mexican. I don't really speak Portuguese, but I thought what I read, I thought couldn't be right. And it basically said that there was this exhibition of skateboarding, and that they were celebrating the athleticism on the urban infrastructure. And I thought, wow, that's insane. That's not true. So when I was sitting in this man's office, he had a really nice office with a great view of downtown Sao Paulo, I said, you know, I must be wrong. This can't be true. What is the exhibit really about? He said, no, you're absolutely right. We are celebrating this. And I think that attitude, that faced with serious problems, you know, with a real lack of infrastructure, a lot of things that we take for common, particularly in Boston, I think that seeing how they can't resolve problems by just throwing more money at it, hiring more cops, or, you know, building another fire station, they have to come up with really creative solutions. And that is what I think that would make this a much more interesting city. Creative solutions, not just throwing more money at things, and a serious deregulation, just having a festival, or putting up you know, a market, or putting up a mural, not having to go through 3 city agencies to get it done. I think that would make this a much more vibrant community.
That's so cool. Okay, so now we have to go there. But I grew up in the suburban Midwest, and I got to Cambridge, and I thought I had entered Narnia. It was like a dream come true, this city. And I think people who have lived here for a long time or have grown up here may not understand how incredible Cambridge is. So for me, it's like I live in my dream city. Cambridge and Somerville. Do you guys know what Porch Fest is?
Can you tell everybody about it,
advertised.
You'll do a good job. Can you tell them what it's about?
Porch Fest.
And you have to hold your mic a little closer.
It's really incredible, and we know about it because of Marcy, who's in the audience. But we were driving Liam home last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, and there were people all over the streets of Somerville, and we called Marcy, and we're like, what's going on? We can't get to your house. She said, it's Porch Fest. Musicians all over Somerville were occupying the porches and having concerts. And it was incredible. And they had a schedule. And so the whole city was moving like in a wave through Somerville from porch to porch. It was really amazing. But I think that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Like, we can learn from Sao Paulo in terms of like deregulating surfaces so that they can become canvases. which I always think would be, actually, I really think that would be amazing. And there is one in Central Square. Did you know that? Yeah. But the fact that Cambridge has, I mean, the reason that I am so, like, I wake up every morning and think, I cannot believe I live in this city, is because it's a pedestrian pocket. I think that is the biggest. And
you
that
said that to me in your interview with me, and it really hit me. You said pedestrian, a
pedestrian pocket. It's a place where where it's connected without parking lots between buildings, basically, where you can walk in a way that's very rich, like what you're talking about with New York. And yet, I mean, Cambridge also has a sense of community, which I feel is, when I'm in New York, I mean, I'm not a New Yorker, so you grew up in New York, so it might be different. But I just, I walk through Cambridge, and I know a lot of people because I've been here now for 30 years. So it's this kind of urban, vibrant place that you can walk everywhere, but you're connected to people. And part of it is because of things like Porch Fest, where the community itself takes it on. They take the responsibility of being a citizen. So we have like this incredible urban fabric, and then we have a community of people who are trying to make connections between one another in a way that creates events, that creates a sense that we live in a place that's really joyful. So I think
I have a question for you on architecture and on that bent. So if we were going to transport these ideas to other cities, a lot of these cities, both in America and in international emerging markets, they don't have a lot of land space. I mean, they're really already sort of built up. I mean, you can go up to Canada, where I'm from, and you get a lot of land. In fact, I could sell you some. But
but land.
But what do you do in these cities where they're architecturally, what can we do? Or how do you put in a green space?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes, a lot of people who think about urban planning, actually would think that land is not necessarily a positive thing, because what we're looking for, like what people are looking for, is density. Right. Okay, because density is what gives you the kind of gush that you were talking about, John. So, I think green space. Cambridge is one of the lowest green space cities in the United States. It has the least amount of green. Yeah, but it's incredible because of all the trees. So people privatize. I mean, you can privatize green space. The whole thing about putting green space on the roof is such a good idea. And actually, there's been studies done that you can reverse. I mean, we could actually reverse global warming if every roof was a green roof.
Well, I have something along the same line for Jonathan, Anna, and MaryAnn. You've all grown up from startups that you founded yourself, and you've gone into sort of these emerging markets. Anna always puts her restaurants in places that then become these crazy popular spots. Winter Hill, we're all excited to see what happens there. Jonathan's put a theme over in Watertown, and we're going to get to talk to you about developing that at some point, I hope, tonight too. I've got a specific question on that. But you went to these emerging places. MaryAnn's just put a new office in Watertown. So obviously Watertown, Somerville, is this just a rent issue? I mean, is it really just at the bottom line in your sort of business, you're like, this is cheaper? Or are you going to these places for a different reason? Maybe we can start with Jonathan and then Anna and MaryAnn.
No, I think it's about agency. You can trick it out. You can make it your own. You can, the town's like, shit, yeah, come on, absolutely, what do you want to do? Like, I'd like 7 liquor permits. Okay, how do you do it? I don't know. How do you do it? Hey, Joe, why do we do the liquor permit? They're so ready to have somebody come and breathe and do stuff, whereas in Boston, it's like, take a number, bitch. Get behind Vertex or whatever. And it's exhausting to even think about it. And then the union, you can't, unless you're. I mean, everything's got 87 rings. The lips are all green, like the Statue of Liberty color from the kissing of the rings. And little towns, little places. Curator, mayor of Somerville, came to my office when we were negotiating with Watertown. What's it going to take? I got anything you want. We'll do a Athena festival. I'll get you a soccer stadium. I'm here. He gave me PowerPoint. Like, here's what I got going on. Here's my demographics. He was dying to have us be able to trick out our stuff, however we wanted. He's like, hey, I noticed you ride bikes. You want to come ride your bike? I got a special path that goes under the interstate, but it's not bad. I swear to God, once you ride it, you won't mind it. And that idea of a people who are comers, who don't have anything to lose and therefore have more to gain, are willing to take risks, break rules, let down fiefdoms, and that's kind of what's fun about a little bit broken, a little bit desperate.
I'm going to stay with you for a second, if the rest of you don't mind, on this topic, because it leads into the next question I had for you specifically, which is, speaking of vibrant cities, you're leading a major development. What's your vision for the area? Will it be different than other American cities? If you have this whiteboard and these people who are up for anything, are you thinking about something different? We want to push you to think about something different. Cambridge built up around Harvard, to be honest, and MIT, now around Novartis. But what are you going to build around?
Well, so I think you're talking about the mall, right? Or are you talking about the campus?
I'm talking about
Both?
both. That's a lot of land, my friend, in the major center. We want to know
30 acres.
How we can help you think about that tonight.
What I mostly want is to get food from not a supermarket, right? To get food from a place where 86 people can come and trade food, but all the models or whatever show that you're supposed to have a supermarket, otherwise you're multiple of your whatever. And I don't believe any of those things. And what's great about Watertown is, again, they like, hey, what do you want, But my idea is to create, I remember Williamsburg and Brooklyn, like nobody was going there. And then and therefore you could afford to go there. And therefore people could afford to do stupid things there.
They still don't have a supermarket.
And there's still a supermarket. But they make 17 different versions of carbon fiber skateboard. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for Watertown is they're giving us permission to try stuff, to honor whatever was there, this historic tradition, but then trick it out, have skateboarding. We have the manager of the arts here in the room with us, who's actually a really good skateboarder, and that's the only reason he got the job. It's not because he's good looking and smart. It's because there's nobody who's allowed, because, what if somebody gets hurt? Well, then they get hurt. We've got like 8,000 hospitals. If they did it with their own free will, let them try it, And that's the idea, is like dirt biking and biking in general, and doing food not from supermarkets, and just trying to break out of the established way. In fact, the Atlantic just had a thing that cool is defined as something about getting outside,
being out of the norm.
Challenging the norm, but not in a dangerous way, like in a non-dangerous way. Otherwise, it's bullying. But if you do it in a non-dangerous way, it's cool. So I was like, I want to be cool.
But niche costs money. And so, I asked that question to you as well, Anna, about why you go to these other locations. Is that because you can go do something really niche and have lower rent and therefore put it towards other things? Or do you go on a spiritual level to these other locations? Because as a chef and owner of places, you pick really out there spots and then they become these magnets. What's your process?
I've sort of scratched my head about it too, because I actually don't quite know the answer to that. I mean, some of it's driven by economics. I mean, the way we run our businesses we spend a lot of money on the ingredients, and we don't run the normal formula to profit in the restaurant business. So we have to give somewhere, and in that case, it for us, and the way we've built them out, and the way we structured the business, and what we choose to how we choose to run our costs, that's the formula that works. And I think, but something to me doesn't quite feel right. I mean, I think I grew up in Seattle, and it was a really small town when I was there, and there was Seattle's, they have a different sort of sense of community, and I think, and my father was an architect and did a lot of work in the community. And so for me, there's something in me that likes to be a part of a growing neighborhood, and I look at it as playing a part, sort of encouragement to the neighborhood to grow and to change and to be happy about what they've got going on there. So it's incentive to change something and to be a part of something as it changes. So it's a little bit of both. But quite frankly, when we were looking at when we found the Sarma location, I was a little nervous because that was a big Whitey Bulger hangout, and there was we were burning sage, and the Greek Orthodox priest came and did an exorcism. There was all sorts of things to get all the bad juju out of that building, but it was, I'm not quite sure I was attracted to that part of it, but what I loved was the edginess of the neighborhood, the diversity that was there, And when I go back to the early days when we first opened Oleana, my main concern was that I didn't want to just cook for one kind of person. So I was in the right city. Cambridge is so diverse, so international, so everything. But if I was to be too fancy or in a neighborhood that was not really a neighborhood and more of a place that, in the middle of sort of a mall kind of place where people are out shopping and things like that, it didn't feel, I felt like I would maybe walk out into the dining room and be sort of restricted by the variety of people that were there. And so I really focused on keeping it low key and putting it in the middle of a neighborhood so that the right people would find me, and it could be everyone. It didn't have to be people with lots of money or people with no money or people in the middle. It would just be accessible to everything. So for me, neighborhoods are really accessible and comfortable.
I remember you saying that in your interview. Actually, you said that you can be shy sometimes when you go into your restaurant, and so to have people there that were from different groups and countries and economic diversity was really important to you, and that stuck with me. MaryAnn, so Cambridge, I love it the way you love it. I grew up in a suburb too, so maybe that's why we like the texture. It's not quite Jonathan's texture of New York City, but Cambridge is kind of expensive. If you own some property here, it feels pretty good. How does an architect, urban landscaper talk to us? You're at the Graduate School of Design. How do we think about that as we watch Cambridge, sort of get quite cleaned up?
Well, we lost. Were you here when we lost rent control? Do you remember that?
No.
Closer.
Chris, were we here?
Okay. There was a period of time where there was rent control in Cambridge that was a completely different city. When I moved here, it was probably 10 years after I moved here that we lost rent control, which I think did change Cambridge, and I think that was actually a sad thing.
But what can we do now? What can we do now? What can we do now? Watertown?
Well, that's why I moved to Watertown.
He is not paying
Just
me
saying.
tonight. He is not paying me. I will hold up his book one more time.
There was another thing that happened in Cambridge from an urban planning standpoint where condominiums became legal. That was illegal for a long time, forever, until I think it was the early 80s when people were able to start dividing houses into private ownership of condominiums, and we lost rent control all at the same time, pretty much, within a 10-year period. And that made the real estate market go crazy.
But I don't want the option to just be Watertown. I want to make sure Cambridge tries to find innovative, different ways that haven't been thought of before of how we keep it textured.
Yeah. That's really hard to... I moved to Watertown really because of Sofra.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Pedro for a save here. Pedro, you gave us the example of San Paulo. How should we think about art in public spaces? I don't want the canned answer of art is good from you. I want to know who should fund it in our generation. Should it be hospitals? They got a lot of money. Should it be schools, higher ed? They've got a lot of money. Should it be big corporations? Should it be individuals? How do we move the needle to have more public art?
Well, I think that, public art, when it's a priority, it's there. It appears. I've been doing a lot of work in Philadelphia, and when I got there, I wasn't so excited by the city, but the more time I've spent there, I've realized that it's almost the polar opposite of Boston, Cambridge. Instead of being a bunch of little cities, it's one big city, whereas this city's poised for growth. They're screwed. The really crazy thing about Philadelphia was that, we hear about, offshoring and manufacturing going overseas and all that. I never see it. I don't see it here. I don't see it in New York. I don't see it in Southern California. You see it in Philadelphia. It's there. It's very, very clear. But what I've also seen is the fact that, whereas Boston doesn't have a thriving artist community like Philadelphia, because New York sucks, the life out of it. Philadelphia, because they're closer, people can live in Philly and just go to New York when they want to, commute back and forth. The fact that there's, we're going to an event on Saturday. It's called Funeral for a Home, that was put on by artists. Again, this idea of agency that you talk about.
What is that? What is Funeral for a Home?
Funeral for a Home is basically addressing the fact that, people are leaving the city, that there are thousands of empty buildings. I mean, Philadelphia is not quite Detroit, but they're having similar problems. So as these cities are vacating, sections of the city are emptying out, there are a bunch of abandoned homes. They become derelict. They become crack houses. All sorts of things happen. They become a hazard. So how artists are going in and taking over spaces. They are, they're turning them into something. They're activating them. So in Philadelphia, people don't, they don't ask for permission. They don't go to City Hall. They just do things. I mean, one of the strangest things I've ever seen in a major U.S. city was after that huge storm they had. I was there. I had gone. I thought I'd be smart and get there the day before. And then because the storm was so big, they closed all the buildings, so no one would meet with me. So I was just sort of stuck in Philly. And I was going around town, and I went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. You guys all remember Rocky. He ran up the stairs. Yeah. Well, when it snows, people sled down those stairs. Can you imagine people sledding downstairs here in any public building? They'd be shot. So, and not only were they sledding, these weren't like store-bought sleds. They were like ripping the tops off dumpsters and sliding down. There were old mattresses, and the one side had worn out, so they'd flipped it. So when I got there, I saw the piece that looked like they'd cut the beast in half, and its guts were spilling out. So these are, and this, Philadelphia, in spite of all of those problems, they support public art.
But we don't have as many of those problems here. So what are we going to do here to be innovative? Because we have a lot of resources here. We have a lot of imagination here as well. We don't have the desperation. We don't have the empty buildings. But I said in my little opener, I don't want complacency. That makes me nervous. That makes me, worry that we're just sort of fat and happy. And I think that we have to push that, and we have to think of ways to do it that's more innovative.
Didn't you just say it? I mean, didn't you just say?
Tell me.
You'd get shot here for sledding down steps.
But that
sledding down steps is fun.
Yeah.
Right? Well, at Shady Hill, you are not allowed to pick up your child with your dog. It's a rule.
Right.
Because of a child may be afraid if your dog barks at another dog or whatever, it might, and this is what I heard, it would threaten the community dogs, i.e. dogs of teachers. Seriously? You need the crazy ones. Remember the ad, the crazy ones? If you carefully excise
all over the city. I mean, they're crazy. Can't we give them some agency?
The Harvard students. I mean, they're kind of crazy, but they're kind of not crazy.
Jump in now.
They're not crazy in the right way. There is a weird kind of desperation among our students, but it's not the kind. Are there any in the room, by the way? Are there? No, just alums. There is a weird kind of desperation among our students, but it's not what's being described here. It's a desperation. It's a terrible fear of not making it financially. But I mean making it financially. That's what. There's a terrible fear that they're not going to be millionaires or incredibly successful, and there's mostly risk avoidance among the students, and I actually I think that's changed. I think that's changed in the 8 years that I've been here. When I first moved here from Princeton, Princeton was all like that. They were all like that. They all just wanted to go right to Wall Street and make their millions, and they were carving the path. And when I got here, there was so much intellectual excitement among the students, and they really cared about stuff. And something has happened. I assume it's the financial collapse has happened, and there's a lot of fear of risk and fear of failure that I think maybe is sort of not just among the students. I think maybe it's in the community at large.
Well, no, and I think that the city doesn't compared to other cities.
Are you talking about Cambridge or Boston in general?
I'm more familiar with Boston, but I would say and I would say Cambridge is better. But for public art, I wouldn't say it's great. There are basically 4 property owners in Cambridge, big ones, and they're not going to let you put any public art on their buildings.
We're going to push Jonathan tonight to think
no,
differently.
but many, and MIT has a world-class public art program, but it is a very insular affair. There isn't that eagerness. I think this is a city that's a community. These are Boston, Cambridge. This is a community that's run by experts, people who know a lot of stuff, and who, there's not a lot of reward in taking risk.
I have to just defend Cambridge. Okay, so I think of Somerville and Watertown as being kind of part of Cambridge. That's wrong, I realize.
So do I.
There is an incredible arts community in Somerville that you should actually look into, being an art curator. I think I've heard that it's the largest number of artists per capita in the United States. So, and they are doing incredible things. That city is amazing. It is like on fire, actually, from a point of view of like community art. Today we're signing up for a recycling art contest. That's the city of Somerville's doing. It has something to do with the mayor.
It's that mayor again. He went to the Kennedy School recently. They brought him in, and they were so excited about him being an alum now.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it has something to do with the edge condition that we were talking about with, psychologically, is the edge a better place to be? And actually, there's economic reasons to be on the edge, but I actually think psychologically it's also, if you're a creative person, there's more anxiety somehow being in the center, for me at least. I like to be like in a place that's slightly hidden, slightly on the edge, in order to get into a zone of creativity, because otherwise I'm too influenced by like what everyone else is doing, or I don't know, there's something about the edge and the way it's frayed and the way it's falling apart and the way there's like cracks in it that I find to be more of a creative place. So a Somerville kind of place, which is the edge of Cambridge. These are people who couldn't afford Cambridge, who used to be able to afford Cambridge during rent control.
So we've decided that Somerville is this. Sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean that. It's the cool kids, and we all know the people in the room who live over there. They're right over there. They're very cool. Yeah. We all love them, and they're super hip. And go Somerville. The thing is, what I want to talk about is how do we not become complacent, because people are buying $5, $6, $7, $8 million homes in Cambridge, and that's Cambridge not just happening in Cambridge. That's happening in Palo Alto. That's happening in Manhattan. Yeah. That's happening in LA. Yeah. That's happening in San Francisco. It's happened.
But that happens. That's capitalism. That's
lame happens. That's like a bumper sticker.
Okay,
can I say that one thing? Go. So here's a theory that explains this. So in my book, we come up with I try to come up with a disease. URQS is a disease, upper right quadrant syndrome, and it's used to describe hospitals. Right? When Mass General gets to the upper right quadrant of its market, as any institution gets to the upper right quadrant of its market, Microsoft, PepsiCo, Mass General, Cambridge, Harvard, there is a necessity, in order to give its internal stakeholders something better next year than they had this year, to turn on its customers. You have to actually turn and eat the host, eat the customer. You have to go to the 22-ounce Pepsi. You have to go to the $2,000 mammogram, the exact same machine that in 1991 was generating $600 mammograms at the exact same room in the exact same hospital, because there's no upper right, there's no place, there's no crazy frontier for the CEO or the management team or the board to say, come hither with me, we're going to get to this great new frontier. And to do that, we've got to bring people with us, we've got to be likable. And whenever institutions find themselves trapped in the upper right quadrant of their market, the best private school, the best university, the best city, the best housing, district, it becomes very hard to get out of the asset protection mode and into the evangelical seek the new frontier mode. It's a disease.
Yeah, but let's kind of move that along. And I feel like, I remember when the Kit Kat bar was 25 cents, and I would get a Kit Kat for 25 cents. And then the Kit Kat was like 75 cents, it was $1.50, now it's like $3. And I'm like, why doesn't the Kit Kat go down ever? Why does it just keep going up? And then, someone in economics that I know and live with tries to explain to me about inflation, and I'm still just like, well, we made money that year, we didn't make money as much that year, why didn't the Kit Kat go back down? And so, I don't understand why at some point we don't look at it and say, wow, this is going to start to really suck if we don't bring the price down.
I'm going to say it.
So where are those really smart people?
Don't make it illegal for somebody to take their $5 million house and put up a high-rise. Sorry. But if you took your chicken coop and you put up 6 stories of cool little tumbling down, and 16 families were working around that same little pile, the cost per house would be divided by 1/16, right? And the energy, the potential for urban magic would light up again. Bust up Harvard, make them divest 85% of Harvard Square. But when you have that, and one of the conditions of URQS is because they're big, government comes in to protect the consumer, and then they almost find themselves inadvertently in an oligopolistic kind of pact. Government and the established players work on, I want to work. Like Governor Patrick came to us when we bought the mall. He's like, I want to work with you. Like, oh shit, here we go. I'm the man now. I'm the guy where he's going to build regulations around me and make it hard for the little guy to come and screw me. That sucks. And the problem is, has anyone here get a little lift of joy in their heart when I suggested their house be subdivided into apartment building?
Sounds interesting. Well, I'm going to go to Sean because Sean talks in his book. You quote David Foster Wallace and his stomach-level sadness. Listen closely. You quote David Foster Wallace and his stomach-level sadness for our society's lack of the sacred today and our inability to recognize worthwhile things in a polarized culture of have and have not in terms of finance and access. Can you talk to this?
Well, has anyone ever read David Foster Wallace?
No, but I just read
2, yeah. You just read the
you
back
would love
of my
David
book
Foster Wallace. He did commit suicide.
He did, yeah.
Because he was so overwhelmed by...
Yeah, he's a fascinating... So he is an American author who committed suicide about, can't remember, 5 years ago or so, when he was in his 40s. And he... many people thought that he was a really fantastic writer. He wrote a 1,000-page novel called Infinite Jest. And what I find interesting about his work is that he's struggling, I think, in a way that some of my students are struggling, and in a way that I recognize as a kind of struggle that's familiar to people of my generation, to some of them anyhow. He's struggling to figure out what it is in virtue of which something gets to be meaningful, something in your life gets to count as worthwhile. And I think he thinks, and I think a lot of artists and writers in the 20th century think, that that's a kind of a special problem that we face that people in earlier centuries didn't face. They faced other problems. They faced the problem of feeding their family. They faced the problem of, finding shelter for themselves. They faced all sorts of problems. But the problem of figuring out what could possibly count as meaningful and important in a life, that's a kind of a contemporary problem. And the idea that we have to face that problem, many, I think, have to face that problem. I think it's also a first world problem, I think it's worth saying. But the idea that we have to face that problem, and that we're even facing it, many of my students are facing it, I think, by running away from it, by not wanting to confront it, by not wanting to think about it. That's a thing that he diagnoses as a problem for our generation. And I think it has to do with the fact that that we think somehow that, and maybe it's an American problem, we think somehow that if there's something that's going to be valuable in our lives, it's going to be entirely up to us. It's not going to be the result of anything outside of us. And I think that that's not right. I think that there's a ton of stuff outside of us, including communities that we belong to, including cities that we get ourselves involved in, including events that happen I mean, this event, Heidi, you're responsible for this event, but it's not just you. It's the community. It's everything here, and each of us is contributing to it. But there's something outside of each of us that's drawing us into it. That's a thing that I think is a possibility for us now. That's not the kind of thing that's based like meaning was in past centuries in sort of religion or a conception of God or a conception of some metaphysical truth. It's something very human, very local, very community-oriented, and it's becoming involved in that kind of stuff that I think gives us the possibility of relieving this burden of having to create meaning for ourselves, which is the stomach-level sadness that Wallace was concerned with.
Meaning in a box, like just by yourself in a box.
Yeah, I think he thought it was he was very much of an individual. He couldn't interact with others. He had a very difficult time thinking about communities, I think, and that's a kind of modern problem, I think. I think we have a lot of very individualistic kinds of people in our world who don't understand how to work in communities, who don't understand what it takes to bring people together to create events that are going to be greater than the people who are involved in them. That seems to me, I think, arguably, the people in this room are not like that. But I think a lot of people are in our culture, and that gives rise to a certain kind of desperation that I think is what he was describing, and which a lot of people feel.
I have to tell you, I wish tonight that we had many more people here, because I think that you guys are probably getting some amazing information, and I wish that we could have. Got 10 minutes. I wish, I look at something like tonight, and maybe I'm just drinking my own Kool-Aid on this, but I wish that there were 500 people watching this right now and talking about it and thinking about it, and maybe they are in their own groups, but I wish we were talking about it more. I would like to use the Public Garden, Harvard College, many hundred years ago, the High Line, as examples of legacies other societies created that they had the foresight to build and leave us. I'd like to know how you think we can move a community towards building something like this during our short time here. What should our legacy be? What do you want the legacy to be for this generation and community, which has abundant resources? Maybe we'll start with you, MaryAnn.
Well, I think that, for me, what I immediately go to is something that seems very obvious to me that we could all be doing, which has to do with sustainability, because that's the kind of architecture that I promote and try to do. And it is so easy to, in the architecture, a lot of what we've been talking about is the built environment, but in our own houses and in our own lifestyles to actually generate energy because of the sun. Solar panels have become, first of all, there's a tax credit for them now, and they've become much less expensive, and they're really efficient, and we could, you could imagine a city where everyone is their own power generator rather than relying on oil and petrol, and carbon products. So I think there's also wind. I always think, wouldn't it be so cool when I'm driving up the expressway and the ocean is to the right when you're coming into Boston, if all of that was a wind farm? It would be so, as an identity for Boston, the way it used to be in Holland, because we have so much wind. I think we are the windiest city. So, who's going to start that solar and wind movement? Is it going to be corporations? Well, or is it, no, I think
we're going to all start putting them on our roofs.
My idea is that each individual becomes almost like wind is a big enterprise that has to do with a large infrastructure for windmills in the ocean, but each person could actually produce a ton of energy on their roofs. So, each individual, because, we all used to be, I'm from farming descent. We all used to be producing something. We're not really producing anything right now. Around Cambridge, unless you're in Somerville as an artist. But, we could be producing our own energy so easily. And I think for me, that's like a vision that I really would love to see a city that does that.
You need a few cool kids to do it, and then it'll take off.
But
Or a startup.
I guess
Who
the
can do
problem
it?
is cool kids don't do what the committee decided that they would do. So it can't be that you can produce your own Emory. It's you produce your own whatever the fuck. You produce your own lemonade. That's illegal in Cambridge. It's literally illegal to go out front. Lucas and Isaac were breaking the law, selling the lemonade. You know, they were lemonade-istas because you need a permit to be a vendor, a street vendor. It was fine. They're 12. They're not going to get arrested. But the number of things. In Germany, they have a category of company called Mittelstand, just small company, under a certain. And Germany has lifetime employment laws and health laws. The number of laws you got to comply with to have employees in Germany is overwhelming. And about 25 years ago, they decided we're going to die. We're going to starve because no one's going to start a company. So they created a size of companies that below this size, none of these laws apply. And so until you get to 12 million in revenue, or I don't remember the number,
entire country?
Mittelstand, whole country, and boom, all of a sudden this guy's doing custom tools and that guy's doing little instruments. And what we need as a society, and certainly Cambridge, is permission to do wacky stuff that might not work without 87 committee meetings with the town fathers, because the people who will do it are a little crazy, and we don't want to scare them because they're nuts. It's crazy. I was crazy to start this company. It was a stupid idea. It worked out great, but it was a total fluke. So you need a lot of kooky people, and if you make it really, you either make them illegal or all the yard guys are illegal. I mean, everybody's illegal.
Is it harder to do a startup today than it was 10 years ago?
Massively. And 20 and 30. I mean, and the result is if you study the biodiversity of our economy, the number of different companies that make up the gross domestic product, the number is declining. The fact that our stock market and our gross domestic product isn't growing by much and it's kind of flat is a little bit interesting, but what's terrifying is the number of companies that make it up.
But don't you think it's because we're not making anything? I mean,
because it's not allowed.
Financial instruments are like the biggest money maker. That's not making something. That's an
peanut butter
instrument,
futures desk at Goldman Sachs.
So where are we going to start? How are we going to shift this? When's our legacy going to be to have the solar? How are we going to move that needle? I mean, these are all lofty, great ideas, but I want to call to action. Pedro, what are we going to do?
Legal street
we've got
vendors
40
in
years.
Cambridge.
What are we doing?
Well, I've tried to do many things here, and it's not an easy city. There are tremendous barriers to entry, and Philadelphia, it's really easy. So when I went to Philadelphia and I met with City Hall, the first thing they said to me, hey, don't forget about us. We want you to do one of your public art projects here. I mean, now, you've seen City Hall in Boston. You've seen City Hall in Cambridge. Have you seen City Hall in Philadelphia? It is like one of the beautiful buildings in this country. That's where they want me to put art. That attitude, the fact that every time I go into a meeting in Philadelphia with another institution, they say, hey, don't forget about us. How can we be, whether it's symposia or, whatever you need, we want to be part of this. That's not the vibe you get here. And I don't spend enough time in Somerville, so I don't know. But the fact is that it is difficult to do things here. There are a lot of barriers. So I would like to see more public art. I think I've been very lucky in what I have been able to pull off. I've had great help. I've had wonderful people to guide me, like Jeff over there, Hargadon. Woo! It is the thing that most people said to me about the Os Gemios wall on the Groves Kennedy Greenway was, how'd you do it? Like, people couldn't believe it. People couldn't believe that we pulled that off.
Isn't that amazing? He got it.
MassDOT, City Hall, and the Greenway, and the ICA. So 4 bureaucracies to deal with. It was summer, and most people were away, and I was able to push it through. That's how we did it. And I didn't care, because honestly, if the ICA fired me, it doesn't matter, because they don't pay much, so it didn't matter. That level of risk-taking is a privilege. I can do it because Lane supports me. Otherwise, it wouldn't work.
Yay, Lane. It's true.
No, she doesn't really support me, sort of. But the fact is that it is a difficult city to get things done. And that lowering those barriers to entry, let's not talk about business. Try and get an easement to put a dormer in your house. How easy is that?
Right.
I mean, there is. It doesn't exactly. It doesn't matter what it is. When one of the things with Shepard when he was here and all that was happening, there was a local artist, Caleb Nealon, warned me. He said, "Okay, you got to watch out for the Back Bay Association." I said, "Well, what the hell is that?" He said, "No, they're committed. They're committed. They're the people that wouldn't let them build the ice store." They wouldn't let him build the ice store. And apparently, the Back Bay Association didn't like the design. They were against it. I guess they didn't look across the street at the Heinz Convention Center, but, whatever. They didn't want that built. And this organization, there are many of them. It's not just Boston. There's Keep Cincinnati Beautiful. There's the Architectural Covenant in San Diego. These organizations where people put themselves in position of power and then based on their own sense of propriety, impose it on the rest of us. So what we really need to do is to continue trying. So those Gemios wasn't the last thing.
I'm so glad to hear that. I was worried that you were like camping out for Philly.
No, absolutely
here,
not. It just takes time. And what's the model going to be? I don't know. I'll tell you when it happens.
Okay, I want that interview.
Once the right site is found, once the right partners are in place, the right artist is there, the money will come. I'm not ever worried about the money. It's everything else that has to happen first.
And is this a philosophy thing? I don't know. I took the classes. But the way you'll know if it's happening is if when it comes around to the thing that you don't like, you don't pull the rope, right? You drop the rope. And so each person here has, you have, right? We all have fought to stop the thing that seemed so wrong. And the point is for someone, that is so right? And every time we hold the rope, we stop something that could grow into something, and we stifle the biodiversity of our culture. And it's hard because you work really hard and you build your temple and you do your thing and you protect your kids, and to drop the rope is hard. But the thing we could all do, there's plenty of potential energy. The potential energy in this community compared to the kinetic energy is enormous. Like the number of ideas that rattle around in our heads or in our dinner tables, or that could,
right.
If we
it's
let it.
How do you open the valve?
Yeah.
Sean, will you try in your answer to talk a little bit about whooshing? Because as soon as we're finished, I have to go to questions. Just a little bit about whooshing so people understand what that is, because I really enjoyed that in your interview.
Okay, I was going to tell a story. It's so interesting hearing everyone talk, because I work at one of the largest bureaucracies in Cambridge, and certainly the most ancient, and trying to get anything done there is like trying to turn the Titanic. So I'm very sympathetic with the idea that there are barriers to entry. I think that's something that we need to work against. But I was thinking about a different kind of story, and I guess I have a kind of a lower bar. It's very exciting. We need you to be able to talk. It's very exciting to hear sort of the idea that there's all these people with all this energy who are sort of trying to break out of stuff. But it feels to me, and I think that's wonderful, it feels to me, though, that we live in a culture generally that prohibits that at this very basic level. So I was thinking of a story that I read about, I think I read about it in The Atlantic maybe a year or two ago, about a guy who had a very funny project. So they have this competition every year. I guess it's usually in England. That's called a Turing test competition. So the Turing test is a test that a logician and a philosopher named Alan Turing invented maybe 70 years ago or so. He wanted to be able to answer the question, how do we know when we've got a computer that's intelligent in the way that we're intelligent? And he said, well, it's very easy. You just run this test. You hook the computer up to a terminal, and then you hook you put a person on another terminal that's hooked up to this terminal, and then there's a judge. And the judge asks questions of the two individuals and gets answers. And if after a certain amount of time the judge can't determine on the basis of these answers to the questions which one is the human and which one is the person, then we'll say that the computer is intelligent. So that's supposed to be a test for intelligence. So now every year they run this competition for computer scientists. Can they make computer programs that pass the Turing test? Now, so what's really interesting is that, the computer programs get very sophisticated. But this guy who the story was about, he decided that what he wanted to be, that they would give a prize, the most human computer. That's the prize that everyone's going for. He decided he wanted to be the most human. So he wanted to be the guy who was on the other end answering questions, convincing the judge that he was a human being. And it's kind of a funny thing, but he said he studied for a long time to figure out how to do this. And he said he realized that what was happening, it is true that these computers are becoming more and more successful. But he said it's not so much because the computers are getting better, it's because we're getting worse. We're becoming less interesting as human beings. We spend a lot of our time doing things that are basically the kinds of things that computers could do. I mean, people have jobs where they have to, be on a call at a call center, answering questions, but they can't actually answer the questions. They have to follow the script that tells them how to answer the questions. And we drive our cars and we're following the directions of our GPS. I mean, we become sort of the slaves of these things that are giving us direction. So I think we live in a world where we spend a lot of time failing to be what we're really meant to be, which is somehow different from what those things that follow rigid rules and just sort of answer questions of others. So it's very hard to figure out what that other thing is. That's why I thought it was an interesting project that this guy wanted to be the most human. But one of the things that I think a very tiny thing that characterizes us is that I think we can be sort of brought up into sort of community experiences where we're not doing something because we're following the rule. We're doing something because that's what has to be done now by anybody who's a real human being in this situation. And I mean, I think it does happen in very marginal, well, maybe not so marginal, but it happens in little places all over the world. You go to a great music performance, and when it ends, you just feel like you've got to stay. You don't have an option. You have to stand up and start applauding because it was so great, and you can recognize how great it was, and you can recognize that you're sharing with other people how great it was, and that's a kind of phenomenon that I think. I don't care how intelligent the computer is, it's not going to have that. That's one thing. That's what in our book we call this whooshing experience, where something happens that's so extraordinary that it captures everyone around them and draws them into it and raises them up. And Stephen Colbert made fun of me for thinking this was such a wonderful thing.
I was disappointed he did that because I watched it last night at our house because the Montreal Canadiens won by, what was the score? 7-7? Yeah, I mean, it's like there was a lot of whooshing going on in our house. So, and when you have those moments, it was so funny because when you said that in the interview, I was like, oh, yeah, that's so true. And it's just one of those, I don't know, maybe the rest of you would clue into that earlier, but I was like, aha. It was that aha. I was thinking he's totally right. Like, how do we create those moments that are whooshing? Not to the extent of David Foster Wallace, where you're trying to create something alone that has meaning all the time and there's pressure, but how do we all come together and create something that has this whooshing? And that's what I do hope we take away a bit tonight.
Yeah. I mean, Colbert was very funny. He said, so we used to have Jesus, and now we've got what, like 4th and 3? Is that what it is? And I thought, well, at least we've still got 4th and 3, at least we've got that. And we got to hold on to that because that is something that distinguishes us. It's a little thing, but it happens when great meals happen. It happens when great family events happen. It happens when great, musical performances happen. It happens before great art of any sort. It can happen if you're human enough to appreciate that those things are demanding of you, that you be drawn up into them. And that seems to me a really human thing that we're in danger of losing.
Thank you.
I was dating a girl in college. I drank too much. I was in the back seat, and her and her friend were in the front. And we were supposed to go down to Main Street and take a left. And I was like, okay, it's down here on the left. Take a left right at the Main Street, because I'm a control freak. I like to drive, but I'm not, because I drank too much. And they got to the intersection, the light turned green, and they just started going, straight, 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 straight. And they drove straight, even though it was a left. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, straight, yeah! It doesn't matter what it is, right? They were whooshing with the straight. Even though we were going to the left, it doesn't matter. It could be art, it could be dinner, it could be the things that we like, but it could be some shit, it could be some great skateboarding. You should see Sean skateboard. It changes everything, you know.
It's gonna be
That's
one of our
just
video
as
interviews,
whooshy, I
okay?
think.
Yeah, exactly.
Anna, do you want to tell us about your view of what we can do? Because you've done some pretty, amazing,
Sean's,
interesting things.
I think that was it in a nutshell. I think we need somebody in the real estate business up here with us to shape it. But I feel like that's exactly what everybody wants, something sensory. That's it. I mean, it's got to smell good. It's got to look good. It's got to feel good. And then, I mean, and there, to me, sometimes there's some sort of tradition or habit involved. Like when I think about the Sunday promenade in Italy, when everyone dresses up and just goes and walks around the street, and there's no space for that. I mean, it's the village, it's the city, but it's the routine and the social. There's obviously there's obvious community connections like churches and things like that. But what about? But what you said is absolutely true. That's what makes everything vibrant, and I think that was the answer. That's what we're looking for. It's based. I mean, there's always a person behind anything really good, I think. So, figuring out how to achieve a space or a place or a tradition or a habit, like Porch Festival, I don't know, but those are the kinds of things that I think, and without risk, nothing happens either. So, it'd be. I scratch my head whenever I see the mall model, and I think if there was someone in the real estate world that could just crack that, just get out of that sort of typical model and put all these sensory things in place, it would completely change any city.
I'd like to do some whooshing for your Turkish breakfast. I took my mom there today. Anybody want to whoosh for the Turkish breakfast at Sofra? This is your chance to whoosh. Okay, Mr. Bush, you have the last word on legacy before we go to questions. What do you think we should be doing with these 40 years? You've got a big plot of land. You're now the it kid with the
I've
big.
got to kill them all. There's no question about that.
So let's talk about that, and let's talk about what you think we should do, because you're a big disruptor. What should we disrupt in the next 40 years?
It has to be what we each do. We each got to do our straight, our bush, our dinner. It has to be, and what we have to do is figure out how to fight back the instinct to protect that which we've got. Right, the upper right quadrant status. We have to let other disruptive ideas. It would be defying the hope of real community to say the thing that the community should do. So you can't say it, because once you say it, then you kill all the ideas that you have no idea what they are about going straight when you think you should go left.
Well, I feel like I'm hoping that a skateboard park happens, even though we're not supposed to say what happens. And I want to thank all of you for being here, because I'm a huge fan of all of yours, and you gave us a lot of your time tonight, and your interviews are all really fascinating, and I hope people will go read them again if they haven't. And I just admire you all a lot, so thank you very much for being here.